I don't have any of that buzzing noise that I had last week, which doesn't seem like it was last week, but I don't have any issues on my side sound-wise, which is a good thing.
That is good.
How does it sound on your side?
No, it sounds good.
All right. Let's see here. Yep, I am ready. Oh, did you hit the record button?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I am ready if you are.
All right. Let's hang on. Okay, look at that. All right, let's do this.
All right.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Alabama Football Podcast, powered by Bama Hammer. The Tide started slow, but really had no problems dispatching Kentucky. Tom, is Alabama ready for the October gauntlet?
Man, at the end of last week, I told you we were just, these games were a formality and, get ready for the SEC championship. So I guess we got to get through these three games to show you that. Tennessee made things interesting with their disposal of the Bulldogs this past weekend. But yes, man, I think this team is better prepared in some aspects for Arkansas. But in other aspects that we spoke about, I think we're going to be tested.
All right. Well, let's use the Kentucky game as a proxy. Talk to me on offense. What'd you like? What'd you not like? What stood out to you?
I did not like the overusage of Calvin Ridley. It's a nice headline to say that, he had his best game of his Alabama career and all that's just great. And it's awesome that he had all these catches and the ball was thrown his way. But kind of like what Saban said in the post-game press conference. He said there was a lot of guys open and said we had plays set up for certain people. The reads were not made. The balls, did not go in some places where they should have, and we didn't spread the ball around. And granted, Ardarius wasn't there, but he's just one guy. We got a lot of talented wide receivers. And so I'd love to know if Calvin Ridley was the first option in a lot of those situations. And do we just have a young quarterback go into the safe first option, or was Calvin Ridley a second or third option in a lot of those catches? And I don't think that was the case.
Yeah. Do you think that's a function of Ardarius being, and it could be a mix, right? Do you think it's Ardarius being out? Do you think it's Jalen, being a freshman? What do you think the driving force there is?
I think it's Jalen being a freshman because the second leading receiver was Joshua Jacobs as his safety valve. And he does a good job of finding his safety valve. He has a good vision for that. But I think it has more to do with, Saban has said repeatedly we have to get O.J. Howard involved. Unfortunately, O.J. Howard, had a stinger on those lovely blocks that we're doing because we don't have a fullback. And so you look at Cam Sims, one catch for -1 yard, right? I was glad to see Robert Foster came back, but he only had 2 catches. Granted, he had 42 yards is nice, but I think it has more. I think it has more to do with the freshman and his grasp of the offense than anything else.
Right. There's just something too. And, when we've talked about this a little bit, and we've talked about it the last couple of years, right? Because we've had a first-time starter, this is the third year in a row, right? And so some of this guy's a freshman, but it's the same type of circumstance where you feed them a portion of the field and just look at this half of the field or this third of the field, or, we may have 4 guys running routes, but I want you to look at 1 and 2 and then, throw it away, or in this, with Jalen's case, maybe run it. And so I think some of the progression will happen. There was, and who I'm talking about. There's this idiot guy who sits behind us at the game, and it doesn't matter what happens, he's yelling at the quarterback. And so, on a designed rollout, and by nature, a design rollout, you're quartering the field. You're taking some of the field away. and on a design rollout, this guy's getting mad that Jalen didn't throw it across the field, across his body, all the way to someone that, was barely open. On another play, I was specifically watching the receiver, and he yelled, throw the ball where everybody's covered. And so I want to be careful that we don't sound like that guy, because that's just nuts. And, there's a lot of those guys, right? But I do think that there's going to be some growing pains with a first-year starter, and then this one just happens to be a quarterback. But we're going to see, and last 2 years are evidence, right, that Blake progressed over the course of the season. Coker progressed over the course of the season. I have every confidence, just based on empirical evidence, that we're going to see a similar type progression with Jalen. And so I'm kind of bullish on, do I see things I don't like? Yeah, but I see a lot of things that I do like. I mean, he came out and was a little scattershot, but then, to start the third quarter, he was 10 of 12. Is that some of that play calling? Yeah, some of it is. Is some of it, just someone stepping up to the plate and sort of taking control of the situation? Yeah, it's a little bit of that too. So I don't know where your head is on that. You can kind of talk us through that, but I'm kind of bullish on the quarterback position. What's your thoughts?
Well, I do think they're putting less on him. In the Ole Miss game, he attempted 31 passes and had, 18 runs. And as we talked about, that was too much to put on a freshman quarterback.
That's a lot.
That is just too much. And I said after the Ole Miss game that, yes, he's a talented runner. And if you want to run the ball 6 to 8 times, I'm totally fine with that. Well, Kent State, he ran the ball 7 times. And in this game, he ran the ball 9 times.
Right.
And so 6 to 8, I'm okay with that. Right. But I do think that, like you said, we've had a first-year starter so many times with this offense since Saban's been here. It doesn't matter whether it's a freshman. It doesn't matter whether it's a first-time quarterback. Granted, Jacob Coker had a better grasp of the playbook because he had been around longer. But there's still nothing like being out there under the lights and having these SEC linemen come after you. And so from that standpoint, this guy has a little bit to make up that they didn't have, because they've been in the system longer.
Agreed.
And I do think it will come. I do think it will come for him. But and I will say this. I do see what appears to be, from the observer, him making progressions. Like, you can clearly see him not looking at one receiver on some plays, and you can clearly see him scanning the field.
Yep.
We've had quarterbacks in the past who looked at one receiver the whole time and never looked anywhere else.
We have you recorded not liking that.
No, well, no coach does, right? Because you're telegraphing where you're going to go. And so I do see him doing some of that, but then on other plays, it's like, back to what I said at the opening. There's no reason, with the talent we have, with a third-year senior tight end who was the most valuable player of the national championship before he got hurt, that he should catch 2 catches in this game.
Yeah.
2 catches for 13 yards is unacceptable. We have a plethora of talent and embarrassment of riches. And I'll just say this, as good as Lane Kiffin is, and I've said how good he is, dude, you and I can name other programs that opened. Okay, Ole Miss is a great example. If we went down their roster, granted they have a third-year senior quarterback. I get that. But when it comes to the talent of the people around them, right, surely we're on par with the talent around the quarterback position that Ole Miss has. And look what they do. Yeah. They light the freaking thing up. I'm not saying we're Ole Miss. I'm not saying we're going to have 500 yards in 17 minutes of offense, but I'd like to see a little more than I see.
No, I'm with you, right? And that's part of them having, that's part of the conversation, right? Is a freshman quarterback versus a senior quarterback. And, their quarterback is always, Chad Kelly's always had a live arm, and, there's sort of NFL bloodlines there. And so, that would be a nice place to be. I mean, good gosh, if we had a 5th-year, senior that was a known sort of, quarterback, a known passer, you could take it would be amazing what we could produce, right? we're just not there. And so it's a little bit unfortunate that, God, we got all this talent at wide receiver and a freshman quarterback, but then it's also a little bit good, right? Because it gives an opportunity to support the quarterback through his growth. And so, there's a little bit of bad that we got to take with the good. And I guess that's how I look at it. And net, I'm bullish for it.
No, absolutely. But let me just say very quickly, when I look at his stat line in this game, 20 of 33 for 262 yards and 2 touchdowns and no picks, right? What's key there? No picks. What also have I spoke about in years past with the A.J. McCarrons and the Greg McElroys of the world, right? Yep. 20 of 30 for 200 yards. So I guess what's interesting is you look at his stat line. If I had not watched the game and just looked at the stat line, I'm like, this is Alabama quarterback type of stats. And so maybe it's the fact that we left so much on the table, and maybe that goes back to the embarrassment of riches, because we left a lot of stuff on the table, but yet he was still 20 of 33 for 262 yards.
Yeah. What else? And I think, we've kind of beat that, right? I mean, there's going to be some growing pains here, and there's going to be some things that we like and we don't like. And I think by the end of the year, it's going to be, some of this is going to start to come together in a way.
Oh, absolutely.
And the last couple of years, we've both in different ways, we've both kind of said, gosh, I wish after going through this, I wish the quarterback were coming back. And this year that will happen. We may say, gosh, I wish Lane Kiffin were coming back, and, that'll be another conversation for another day. But, I think by the time the season rolls around, we get in the last third of the season, we're going to really start to see some things gel. In this stretch, this is going to be like a growth stretch through the rest of October, coming through the bye, and we can talk about Arkansas and Tennessee and A&M and what we may think about them, but I think this is going to be a trial by fire these next 3 weeks, and I think Jalen's going to come out of this really grown up for it. But let's talk about some of the other freshmen that are contributing. And in my mind's eye, wants to go straight to Jacobs. Take us somewhere else, or take us to Jacobs. What else caught your eye?
Well, no, talking about Jacobs for a second, I was intrigued by how they worked Damien Harris. I mean, Saban said after the game that, he's had apparently a high ankle sprain, which I'm glad that's all it was, and that we were going to work him back into the game. Well, it was, he finished with 2 carries for the game. And what was very interesting is he got the second carry of the game after Joshua Jacobs. So Jacobs starts the game. He gets the second carry for the game on 3rd and 9, and he gets 7 yards to the Kentucky 31. And here it is, 4th and short, and this is before Jonah Williams has his false start. And Damien Harris is like running back to the huddle like, okay, I'm ready to get this. 4th and 1, 4th and 2. I think at the time, during the game, I thought it was 4th and 1, but the stats were showing 4th and 2. And I think he's all excited to, let me get in here and get this. And then he gets pulled, and Jacobs comes back in the game. And you could tell he was very frustrated that he had gotten pulled out of the game. And so I found it interesting, real quick before we go to Jacobs, that Harris gets the second carry of the game. Then he gets the first carry of the second quarter, and then they shut him down, and he doesn't get another carry the whole game. I thought that was just very interesting. If you're going to work a guy back in, don't you think it's kind of odd you only did 2 carries?
Yes and no. I kind of see this from the other side of the coin. I think if it weren't, I think Saban, since he's become a grandfather, has been is a little more sentimental about some things. And so Damien Harris, the opportunity to play against Kentucky, obviously he wants to participate in this game. You can't keep him off the field. Plus the competitor, wants to sort of battle through. And I think Coach said, look, I'm going to give you some carries against these guys, but I'm going to shut you down because you have a high ankle sprain. It's the type of injury you can't just come back. And it's the type of injury that you think maybe you can play through it, but it doesn't get any better without rest. And we need it to be better against better teams than Kentucky. So if this were a couple of years ago, he wouldn't have seen the field. He might not would have even dressed, and he would have been walking around on a boot, 4 years ago. And so I think Saban looks at it and says, "Look, I'm going to give you a couple plays because I understand this is a big deal, but you know we're going to manage that, and you're going to be better and healthier for the meat of our schedule coming up, and you know I'll give you 50 carries next year in Lexington."
I'm with you, but if you bring him in on 3rd and 9 and he gets you 7 and he looks pretty nice doing so at the time before the false start, leave him in for the 4th and short. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
that would have been to your point of sentimental value, right? Early in the game, right? He gets a big 4th down, right? How many running backs live to get the 4th and 1? That's all I'm saying.
I understand. I think and you know, and you can go the point the guy's hurt. He's not the one I want in there on a 4th and 1. And you know, there's also, hey, we've got a plan, and it's a health sort of injury related plan. We've got to have the discipline to stick with it. So I hear the competitor. I do, right? I hear the competitor say, give it to him. But I also, with a little bit of remove, you know, I see both sides of it. And, you know, I would not have been surprised if he didn't play at all. And I think it was just a nod towards sentimentality that he got to. And, you know, we're not going to abuse that gift horse. And that's how I kind of saw that play out. But Jacobs, and look, just take nothing away, you know, from Damian, but you know, poor guy's in a Wally Pipp situation, right? Because Joshua Jacobs, holy cow, he has looked magnificent these last 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. Who does he remind you of? Just give me a player name that in watching the game, not that you heard, but in watching the game, who did he remind you of? Because it might be exactly who you heard, but before you tell me that, just in watching, there was one particular play in the game that he absolutely reminded me of one person.
You know, I mean, I think sort of in recent times, there's a little bit of Mark Ingram there because his balance, he's not as big or sort of as thick, it seems, as Mark was, but he's got some good balance, some good vision. I think he has a little more wiggle than Mark. Who does he look like to you?
Absolutely, Mark Ingram, man. Okay. There was a one play in particular where he made some cuts to make two guys miss on consecutive moves there within about a 3-yard period. That I'll just simply say this: I haven't seen a running back with that balance make. Okay, TJ Yeldon was a different runner. Right. But TJ Yeldon is the only runner under Saban that I have seen have that running style besides, okay, he had a different running style. This guy is the closest to Mark Ingram that I've seen at Alabama under Saban.
Yeah, he did have a couple of plays where, and his body type doesn't lend itself to Yeldon, but there was a couple of times he just had a little bit of electricity to him and a little bit of move. And I said, you know, that's a Yeldon looking move, but sort of his overall body of work is a little more, you know, young Mark Ingram, maybe not as thick kind of through the body as Ingram, but you know, most of my memory of Ingram is you know, him as an upperclassman versus, you know, Jacobs as a freshman. Sure. So, you know, discounting all of that, yeah, I definitely see some similarities. I've heard someone say Derek Lassick, and you know, we certainly remember Derek Lassick. You know, I probably don't have quite as, for a lot of different reasons, as clear a vision of him running as I probably should have as many times as I watched him, but that's another story.
It was specifically that 23-yard pass play that he did that was just very dynamic, and it's a different running back that we've had at Alabama for a little while. And so Derrick Henry obviously was a power back and how he did things. And Saban, even back to LSU, likes his 2 and even 3, running backs when he was the head coach at LSU. And I think Jacobs has clearly put himself in the mix, when Damian comes back to share carries. And what do you think about Bo? The usage, are you surprised? I mean, are you surprised? And I know going with the hot hand, et cetera, but, Bo finished with a very respectable 4.2 yards per carry, had a nice 14-yarder. but only had 5 carries. Are you surprised Scarborough is relegated to 5 carries? You know, kind of lumped up there with Emmons that had 3 carries.
I mean, if you would have asked me at the beginning of the season, I'd say, yes, very much so. Having watched it kind of played out, I guess I'm not really that surprised, with all the data points that we have. He seems to, and I really hate to use this expression, but he almost sort of runs tentative or runs scared. He has a history of some injury, and it just seems that he has that on his mind when he's running. I mean, when he went out, against Kent State, I guess it was a week ago, and he went out, he could have gone back in, but he just immediately, almost on the ground, took inventory of his body, and there was pain, and he's almost, and I didn't feel the pain, so I want to be careful, but it's almost like an overreaction based on his history. And I don't know, I don't want to sound unfair, and so that might be a little bit unfair, but it just
he could still be gun shy right now. Sure.
And so I just think there's a little bit to that. I think there's a little bit there. And so I think that, when he can operate a little bit in space, some toss sweeps, hear me say that again. I think that sort of opens him up. He had a nice reception, and made some hay out of that. I think that he is, man, I just want to stamp him in that Justin Fowler mode, the sort of the H-back, and I think that will help. You talked about fullback and a little bit ago. I think that he could really be an asset. He could really be a weapon in that type of capacity, and that's where
he showed some really nice hands so far.
Yeah, really nice hands, and he's big, and he showed himself a willing blocker. I mean, he really laid somebody out, for a run with Jalen, one of Jalen's design runs, and he really, went out there and hit somebody good, and so he has some will, he has some willingness. He's just, there's times where he's tentative, and I could just see him in that H-back where maybe he feels like he's a little more in control. And I think he does maybe a little bit, he's a taller guy, has a little bit of an upright mode, and he might be a little concerned for his knees, and he's got a track record to suggest that may be the case. And so maybe an H-back opportunity, would open something up for him.
Well, I definitely think that it'd be interesting to see your take on that now that OJ is banged up a little bit. I'm sure we'll still see OJ go, but with him being banged up a little bit, it'd be interesting to see. And obviously, Bo's Bo's a young guy. Bo's still got plenty of time, but maybe that's an example of fans putting too much hype on him too early.
Yeah, I definitely think there's that. I think that if you were to start to think long term, OJ Howard's not going to be here next year, and could we use someone dynamic to in that role? And of course your mind wants to say yes, but then your mind also says, well, I don't know, we're not using what we've got. So in the person of Howard. So I don't know. What do you think about BJ? He only had just a couple of carries, but he had that last carry of the game, and he just seemed to, the carries that he got, he seemed to run with a little more want to. And that last carry of the game, it just seemed like he was sitting on that sideline. Man, I've seen Jacobs run enough. Okay, I know how I need to do it now. And he's not going to.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was. I'm going to try to leave you with a good impression in the carries I have.
Yes. And he's a different style of runner. He's a different athlete, and so he doesn't have sort of the nimbleness, if you will, and that's just the nature of it. He's still a very talented runner, and he definitely demonstrated some want to, lowered his shoulder, kept driving, had the leg drive, and so hey, if success of one rubs off into success on another, that's what competition's all about, right? And so I think Saban a little bit has a little wry grin saying, yep, this is exactly how this stuff is supposed to work.
Well, I will say, going back to Jacobs real quick, the story is very interesting how they, watched him in a basketball game or on a basketball court, and, how they picked him up so late in the recruiting process. And it does make you wonder right this second. It goes back to the embarrassment of riches, but it makes you wonder, with Damian being banged up and Bo, having, a history of being banged up as well, where would this team be right now without Jacobs? I mean, not to spend a lot of time with this today, but this was a better Kentucky team. This wasn't the Kentucky team that we played when we were in college.
Right.
To their credit, they came in with a good game plan, and it was a very competitive game early. It wasn't until some big plays in the second quarter that really kind of, the end of the second quarter, the beginning of the third quarter has really changed the momentum of this ball game. But Jacobs playing for you with 16 carries for 100 yards, it'd be fun, like a video game. It'd be fun to sit there and have Jacobs not in there, right, and see how this game would have gone without Joshua Jacobs 16 carries for 100 yards.
What's interesting, and this may be sort of an off-season project, but, were it not for, fill in the blank, and go back almost to every Saban team and ask that question about one player. If it weren't for, and fill in the blank, and make yourself fill in that blank with a true freshman. And so this year, pick a number, right? You've got, Jonah, you've got Jacobs, and you got Jalen, right? And that's just on the offensive side of the ball. But last year, what would you have done without a Minkah Fitzpatrick, or for that matter, a Calvin Ridley? What would we have done without an Amari Cooper? What would we have done without, Julio's an obvious one, but, there's an exercise there, D. Milliner at one point, right? I mean, go back through and TJ Yeldon and think what would we have done without fill in the blank freshman? Heck, I put Geno Smith in that category his freshman year. The way that he finished out the season, playing every snap the last 4 or 5 ball games, you could reason, were it not for one freshman some of those years, how many of the 4 national titles do we have? And it's an unknowable exercise, but for all the talk about you'll never play at Alabama, all the recruiting talk, right? You'll never play at Alabama because you'll ride the bench, and they've got so many players, and he doesn't play for those people. Just don't. I mean, clearly it's just bull-faced lying. If somebody's going to tell me that, then I'm not going to believe anything you say, because clearly you're not even looking at the lineup. You're not even looking at the roster. I mean, no wonder you lose to Alabama. You don't even know who they're playing on the field. And so that I wish for a moment I could be a recruit just to have that conversation with opposing coaches, because are you kidding me? Look at the opportunity that's afforded to young guys. And this year it's like it's on spades, so I don't know. It's definitely an interesting exercise.
No, I'm with you. I just specifically in this game, right? If we would have had to just rely on the pass, and I guess it would have been like Ole Miss, we would have seen Jalen Hurts run a lot more. It's just an interesting thing to bring up. And I do think that there has been a conscious effort in the past couple of weeks to limit the amount of runs that he's made, which makes me wonder if it was more him and not Lane Kiffin, because Lane Kiffin even came out and said that I think he's relying too much on his feet. And so when your offensive coordinator comes out and calls you out and says you're relying too much on your feet, then obviously, that means there's a lot of these runs that were, all on you. And then I do think that for him, from a comfort level standpoint, I think he is trying to make a concerted effort to sit back in the pocket and to try to do the offense that they want him to do. I just think it's going to take, it's just going to take time.
Right. Well, I look at it this way, and I've spent some time thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, right? And so you and I are of, an age where the quarterback didn't run the ball. And, you think of a pro style offense, there was always, Air Force who had a running quarterback. There was always a team that had a running quarterback, but it was always sort of, sort of a kitschy thing. And it wasn't mainstream in the way that it has become. And so when quarterbacks first started running, more and more, and it became a little more, prevalent, it was, you're going to get your quarterback killed. And our style of sort of watching the game and has always been handoff. That's how that's how you run the ball. And if there's a scramble, then that can be exciting, but that's the exception. And so that's kind of how we've looked at it. and to whatever degree that has sort of hindered our interest in wanting to have a running quarterback, then then so be it. And so if that's sort of been our mentality, imagine like multiples of that, Coach Saban feeling that way. And but he's also closer to it the other way, where he's got to try to design defenses to stop the mobile quarterbacks, and then he struggles to do it. And he realizes, look, if I'm having so much trouble stopping these guys, other teams are going to have that trouble too. I've got to figure out how I can maybe try to embrace this. But he still sort of wrestles with the idea of, I'm going to get my quarterback killed. And so he doesn't want Jalen to go out there and just run willy-nilly, because that frankly, I would speak for Coach and say that probably scares him a little bit. And when we can talk about Blake or we cannot, but when he leaves the program, and so now you're down sort of your backup, that probably scares him a little bit more. And so the thought of, we got a quarterback that can be mobile, we better be very careful in how we use him. And we can't just have him run around willy-nilly. We've got to still be who we are, but let's leverage, but at the same time, let's try to leverage the skills that he has. And so I'm not trying to say two different things, but I want both. I want him to be careful, not get hurt, and use them judiciously. And so
I think the runs were I think the runs were there was a little bit more thought put into the game plan of the runs that he made in this game versus last week.
Yeah. That's
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a more succinct way of saying it. But there's sort of an evolution. There's a psychology at work there, and that's something I've been thinking about. I just didn't think of a succinct way of saying it, but there's been a psychology sort of at play there, and that's going to be an interesting thing to kind of watch unfold as well. Hey, let me hit you with a question. This sort of jumped out at me right at the beginning of the game. First drive of the ball game. I think Kentucky wins the toss. They elect to defer, and so Alabama starts with the ball. First drive, we move down to the field, get to the 36 on a 4th and 7 from the 36. Alabama decides to go for it. Would have been a 53-yard field goal. I just want to get your read on that situation. Is that 53 yards to start the game? We don't feel comfortable with that long of a kick. Is that because we haven't seen our defense, or is the defense going to come out strong, or how are we going to be prepared to stop them? So there's a little bit of a gamble in going for it. Is that more concern for the kicker, or is that more, oh, we've got this, guys? What's your thought on that?
I think it's more concern with the kicker and whether he can connect on that, because we've talked about the inconsistencies that he has had. And so 4th and 7 with a mobile quarterback is a little more doable than a drop back passer.
Sure.
And you also have been very confident in your defense and how your defense has been playing. And their name is still the Kentucky Wildcats. And so I think it all kind of rolls into there.
Okay. So, it just seemed that was the decision. There was no discussion over it. Oh, no, from this distance, we're going for it. Even though 4th and 7 is a long down and distance. And if you think about it, there's also the mentality that says, well, we're on the 36. If we punt and it goes into the end zone, which there's a pretty good chance that could happen, they get it on the 25. So we're talking 11 yards.
I don't know if they. Okay. Was most fans in the stadium surprised they went for it on 4th and 7? Yes. Was I surprised they went for it? Yes. Absolutely. After the false start, I was like, okay, we're going to punt. Then we had the false start and we still don't punt. I'm like, what the hell? Right. So I was definitely surprised. Okay. I wasn't thinking it was the, let me gamble. This is going to be a high scoring game. Nothing like that. Right. I wasn't, you and I've seen that, national championship game, Texas Longhorns. This wasn't that. Yeah. I think this was, defense, you got this. If they get the ball in the 36, I'm not concerned. That kind of deal.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious, because they then proceeded to drive down the field with the good field position and get the first points on the board.
And get the field goal. There was a little bit of me that said, wow, coaches are very confident in that we've got this game. Just not even a second thought. We're going to go for it on a 4th and 7.
Not even call a timeout to think about it.
Yeah, not even just guys, just go do it. And of course, we almost converted, and it was ironic, right, that they went out and scored. Unfortunately, it was just a field goal, but I thought that was interesting. I thought it multiple times during the game. And we can park on this more when we get to, or at least a component of this when we get to special teams. But at various times during the game, and this being an example, I think our coaching staff, I think Saban's plan was, I just want to get up on these guys early so that we can get a lot more reps to Cooper Bateman. And we never got, Coach has a number in his mind. And I almost want to go back and, I wish I had the time to sort of plot some games sort of over time, and at what point differential sort of relative to quarter of the game does he start to bring in his backups. And he knew that he wanted to play Cooper some, and that he wanted to play them with the starters. And I just think and could he have done it earlier? Yeah, but there was a number he had in mind that didn't happen. And I think that, could he rotated in a series, any of that? Yes, of course, obviously. But he has a number where he wanted to just hand the reins over, which is a different thing. And he didn't get that number until much later, and he was very frustrated by that, I imagine. And so Cooper got some run, but not nearly as what I think the coaching staff would have liked for him to get. What's your thought on that?
Well, and I think that's the coaching staff's fault, and it runs downhill from Saban.
Yeah.
And so while I respect your opinion of his thought process there, shame on you, because you just had a transfer of a quarterback who was the number 1 or number 2 quarterback prospect in the nation on Wednesday. And now you've got to build up the confidence of a Cooper Bateman, whose confidence has been destroyed when you put him in the Ole Miss game and yanked him, and he hasn't played since then. And now when your mobile quarterback gets banged up, if it happens, hey, you're my guy. I'm sorry. When you went into at halftime, it's 17-3. So, okay, I'll give you a little bit. Your defense stops them. They then proceed to get the ball. Your offense gets the ball. The first drive of the second half, they go 9 plays for 78 yards. They go up 24-3. He gets paid lots of money. He's the coach. I'm not. But in my opinion, that was a perfect opportunity right there. Yeah, you're about 21 points. It's not an even series kind of thing, but now it's 24-3. It feels a little bit better. Your defense just stopped them with all the adjustments after halftime. I think he should have come in right then.
Yeah, and even if and that was even if that had been the plan, and you prepped both of the quarterbacks, and so both kind of knew what was going on. You could say, I'm just giving you a series here. In hindsight's 2020, I think that he wanted to get it up, and that was 3 scores, maybe get it up to 4. I don't know, but there was a point where, I think he would have just pulled Jalen, and that's what he wanted, as opposed to, I'm going to just give him a series, because there's also the reality, and so juxtapose this. There's also the reality that Jalen is still just a true freshman himself, right? That has not changed, and so there's still the idea that he needs to get as many reps as he can get too, and so.
Yeah, but you got to have your backup ready. Yeah. You're about to go through the gauntlet, right? You're about to go through the gauntlet. Your quarterback got crushed in the Ole Miss game, and because he's a big guy build-wise, and he's got some strength about him, he was able to get up from that. You and I both know there's other quarterbacks, like the Michigan State quarterback, who would still be on the sideline. And so, again, with the blink of an eye, that play happened because your freshman right tackle, who has played phenomenally well, missed one read.
Yeah.
Missed one play. One play, your quarterback could have been gone for the year with a broken collarbone. All they got to do is pick them up, turn them to the side, and drive on top of their shoulder, and now you could have a broken collarbone, just like Tony Romo. Really?
Yep.
It's that quick.
No, I understand.
All I'm saying is, if you're a national championship contender, okay, and everything is unfolding the way it's unfolding, everything you just said about now I'm more nervous because now my backup's gone. Well, I'm sorry. If you go back and look at the play-by-play, by bringing Jalen in when I said, bringing him out when I said Cooper Bateman would have got 2 series instead of 1 series. Is that a lot more? No, but it's about 10 or 12 more plays.
Potentially, yeah.
That's all.
No, that's true. Hey, we did see Lester Cotton come in later in the game at guard, and so
you're reading my notes, man. That's the only guy. So we play this little chess game again, man. Is it still just trying to screw with Alphonse? Is it just the new diet plan of college football?
Well, look, I make no jokes about the diet plan. I think maybe there's something to that. He's always been a big guy, but he looks kind of sloppy big out there. Is there a little bit?
But he played very well, right?
He did.
You don't see any problem. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Don't you see a whole difference in the running game between the guards when he's in there?
No question. No question.
No doubt.
Do you think though? And so look, this is I gotta have a reason for things. I can't, and so they're not all good reasons. Maybe they're silly, but is there a little bit that says Alphonse isn't in the shape that he really needs to be in, and so he can only give you 75% of the reps that someone else can at sort of peak, and if you stretch him, if you extend him, you increase the potential for him to have injury, and so we're going to rotate him in. We're going to rotate Cotton in. For the sake of Alphonse, and hopefully over the course of a couple more games, his fitness will kind of work itself back up. Am I just making stuff up, or is there an angle there?
You're absolutely making shit up there, man. I think it's more to do with they're dangling the competition carrot, and they're basically keeping Alphonse Taylor guessing that, dude, your spot's not for sure. We can yank you out at any time.
Okay.
Method to the madness of when they bring Cotton in. That's what drives me crazy, because now I'm looking for it. And there's no method to the madness as to when he comes in the game. It's not like, a certain, goal line situation or 2-minute offense or, whatever. Like, he'll just come in random, which I guess could feed to your argument, but I don't think they're putting that much thought into it.
Well, I don't know. I hear what you're saying. When it's random, I feel like, God, I need to have a reason. And so that's where I go to. And so I don't know if there's something to that or not. And, I guess
I will tell you very quickly the Cooper Bateman thing. I did find it interesting, to your point about him being in with the starters, which is why I think they should have done it earlier, right? Yes. This is why we should be head coaches. If he would have gotten the last 2 series of the game, you could have let him have that first series with the first string offense and the second series with the second string offense. Instead, what they did, which was really cattywampus, man, is they literally had the first string people in there with him, first string line in there for a couple plays of that series, and then they quickly rushed him off the field in between the series and brought in the backups.
Right.
I thought that was very weird.
Well, we can talk about why we think that happened in just a minute. Anything on offense? Anything else on offense, or you want to go mini game balls?
No, man, I'm going to let you start with mini game ball so you won't criticize my mini game ball.
Well, I don't know.
So go right ahead, man. Go ahead.
I don't know why you think that would.
Who's your mini game ball?
I'm for all the reasons we've talked about, I'm going Bo. I just, it was a nice catch, nice blocking. I think he probably still does have some things he needs to get over, but I think that he has I think his upside, his potential is just otherworldly. And I think that he may well find another positional home, but I think his contribution, I think he's going to make great contributions. And what I saw from him on Saturday, I like some of what I saw. So mini game ball to Bo.
So Bo qualifies for a mini game ball, but I guess Joshua Jacobs, as a true freshman, does not qualify for mini game balls, right?
Well, when you take the headline,
he's a known commodity. Okay. All right. So we'll go another angle then. I could equally say that I'm welcome back Robert Foster, who you probably are not going to say is a mini game ball, but I don't care. And so Robert Foster, who was your starting wide receiver, and people would not have known Calvin Ridley's name. I'm glad he's back. I want to see him get more involved in the offense. And it's pretty freaking dynamic in your first game back to have 2 catches for 42 yards. We've seen a lot of receivers on this team that can't get anywhere near 42 yards, much less on 2 catches.
Right.
And so I love the fact that one was for 27 yards, and I'd like to see some more Robert Foster.
Right. Okay. So do you hear the paper that I'm rustling here?
Sure.
So I went and pulled out the podcast bylaws, and so just to refresh your memory on the mini game ball, the concept is that anyone can read a headline. And so all the breathless media are going to pick out, who just had the best stat lines. And so let's write all our articles about those guys. And so they get the game balls. But our mini game ball is who made sort of an under the radar contribution to the team. And so no one wrote a headline about Bo Scarborough, but he made a contribution. And so in your way,
anybody write a headline about Robert Foster?
No one wrote a headline about Robert Foster, and so you kind of got it right today.
Dude, I can still say Joshua Jacobs, okay, because there's a lot of people that don't know who the hell he is. And we had a lot of good conversation about Joshua Jacobs.
No, I'm sorry. You're not getting away with that one. If people are listening to this podcast, they know who the heck.
They know who's Joshua Jacobs. Because this is correct. But the average person who doesn't listen has no freaking idea.
Alabama who know who Joshua Jacobs is. So, I mean, come on.
All right, so flip the field to defense, man. What stood out at you on defense?
What stood out to me on defense?
I got lots of stuff.
Well, no, I've got a couple things too. Look, I'll tell you something that stood out to me. Ronnie Harrison, we're starting to use him, and I'm going sort of deep in the meat, right? Ronnie Harrison, we are really starting to use him like Landon Collins in a lot of versatile different ways, bringing him down into the box. There was more than one occasion that we were in a dime and we would take the linebackers and walk them up to the line, and the person sort of manning the quote unquote middle linebacker position, the only, quote unquote linebacker in the linebacker space, like literally behind the line in the box, was Ronnie. And we did a lot of sort of bringing him into the box, that type of situation. We'd bring him into the box, and it would look like we had sort of 2 linebackers. We would bring him into the box, and one of the linebackers would go down to the line. We're starting to use him in a lot of sort of different ways, kind of down in the box. And so we had a nickel or we had a dime with Ronnie down in the box. And I watched him a couple times, and he was just making nice plays on the field. And obviously he picked up the fumble and ran it in for a touchdown. That really stood out to me, watching how we deployed him. I just kind of got excited watching some of that, and Landon Collins came right to my mind. I mean, it's a different player, different kind of – I'm not necessarily comparing him, but the versatility of how we're using him and sort of walking up to the line, I really like seeing some of that.
Well, man, that's definitely one of the things that I was going to talk about today, because I think he brings a different level of tenacity than you would normally see in someone 216. Yep. He's not an overly big guy. He's only 200. He's only six. He's 6'3", but he's 216 pounds. I think when he leaves Alabama, the guy's going to end up being 225, 230. But I think he's just, the guy's got a meanness about him. And on the play where Rashaan Evans, which is one of the things I was going to bring up, on the play where Rashaan Evans got his he stripped the ball. To your point, Saban even commented on his coach's show afterwards. He said, they had max protection, 7 protection on a lot of third and long plays, and they would keep a tight end and a running back in to protect the quarterback. And he said there was very few situations where they only kept 6 guys in on third downs. And on Rashaan Evans' play, they only kept the running back in the game. And so to your point, happening here, number one, Reuben Foster has slimmed down. And yes. Reuben Foster, because he's slimmed down, he can get to the quarterback. A year ago, the guy couldn't get to the quarterback, blitzing the gap. And so Reuben Foster, to his credit, has really he has literally made his game more well-rounded as far as that ability to get after the quarterback And so on that particular play, like you said, Ronnie Harrison was right in the middle at the middle linebacker position. They sat there and literally brought their one linebacker, Reuben Foster, up to the right side, standing up, but they only sent 5 guys. So they sent 4 down linemen and Reuben Foster. But Ronnie Harrison in the middle of the box, he was actually spying Steven Johnson, the quarterback. Now, Steven Johnson still had 7 carries, still had 7 carries on the day, okay? But literally on that play, when you go back and watch it in slow-mo, Ronnie Harrison is literally just moving with the quarterback, and he was ready to be there if he got to the next level. And I bring that up real quick because back to your analogy of what he brings to that position is Landon Collins was not as quick as Ronnie Harrison. Landon Collins could thump you, but I think Ronnie Harrison is back to that blend of what they've done at the safety position where they get a quicker, faster guy. And so I think he brings a versatility to that spy position in the dime that really neutralizes the running quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that'll be fun kind of to unfold as we watch, more and more of the running quarterbacks. You mentioned you had a lot of stuff on defense. What else?
Well, going to Ronnie Harrison again, because of his ability to be a little bit more agile, if you would, and not your typical big safety in the box. I also noticed when we would go to late in the game, Kentucky went 4 wides. And Saban talked about the fact that they had done 4 wides early in the season, but they had really not done a 4 wide set formation for the past several weeks. Well, in that late third quarter, early fourth quarter, they went to some 4 wides, and it was very interesting how we attacked it. Instead of bringing in a 4th cornerback, we dropped Ronnie Harrison down as a cornerback over the 4th wide receiver in the slot. We brought in Hootie Jones to be center field with Eddie Jackson, and we literally had 3 cornerbacks and Ronnie Harrison in our bump and run coverage on their 4 wide receivers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that really just goes back and speaks to his versatility, right? I mean, he's a different guy from Landon. Landon was a little bit, bigger and thicker and whatnot. But yeah, it really speaks to his versatility. And so it's going to be fun to watch how we deploy him. It looks like he's really coming into a nice role. I mean, not that starting is a bad role, but, a lot more, sort of sub packages, especially when we get into thinking about the dime.
So, no, absolutely. But just real quick to stay on this for just a second, we were talking years ago about when teams would go 3 wide, right? That Alabama had to find that 3rd cornerback. And what set Alabama apart is they were able to find that 3rd cornerback. Well, we've talked about Eddie Jackson as a former converted cornerback who is a safety. And we talked about having 5 cornerbacks on the field. And so I just think this speaks to the fact that Saban, to his genius, is building a blueprint of how to stop the 3 and 4 wides and the empty sets with the mobile quarterbacks. Because in that formation with Hootie Jones and Eddie Jackson and Ronnie Harrison, you got 3 safeties, you got 3 cornerbacks, you got 4 linemen who are fast and nimble to go after the quarterback, and you got a middle linebacker who's lost 20 pounds who's also fast and mobile. I mean, that's pretty freaking deadly. You got 11 guys on the field who can run the 40-yard quicker than I can.
Well,
listen, you know what I'm saying, man? That's not your traditional defense, right? The 4 wides was to create a matchup problems against your big, slow safeties. Right. Alabama has neutralized that completely.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And it's something that, if you think about it, you can't flip the switch overnight because you have to recruit to it a little bit. And so, this is the manifestation. And last year too, right? Because last year is when we first saw, Eddie converted and when we really were playing guys, we got 4 corners out there, 4 true cornerbacks out there. I mean, that was really something. And so to see that sort of continue to play itself out, and you can watch in recruiting, right? I mean, we're recruiting, more cornerbacks than we are safeties, and the safeties that we are lighter and and sort of lankier, if you will. They're taller and more alike in Eddie. So it's definitely, you know, if it hasn't sort of figured it out, it's certainly coding in that direction. And it gives a mobile quarterback and that type of offense something else to consider, because we're much more mobile in how we defend it. And so that's interesting. You know, I want to talk about, I'm just going to hit this because you got some other things as well, but just the depth on the interior center. You know, Deron Payne played well again, as he does. And there was a point in the game where, you know, and you kind of called it, that Kentucky's going to try to run the ball, not necessarily because they think that's how they're going to win, but that's how they can keep it closer and a little more respectable, and they can sort of consume the clock. And they actually did win the it was pretty well split in the middle, but they got sort of a little bit of the nod on the time of possession. But there was a point in the game, and it was later in the game, where they were, you know, they were content just feeding the ball. And we were playing in the nickel, so we were playing a little softer in the box. But typically we could stop the run against a nickel. So take that for what it's worth. But we brought in Josh Frazier in the middle, and they were moving the ball. And at one point they got a first down, and we brought in Deron Payne. They didn't get another first down. And so it just speaks to
what were you thinking real quick on that drive? Because I know the drive you're speaking of, right? You were sitting there thinking, we can't stop them. They're going to get a touchdown late in this game, weren't you?
I thought that they might. And I was like, come on, Josh Frazier, make you a play. We've got to – this is it. This is the crucible of the moment that, you know, you and I have been talking about. And, you know, fortunately the game wasn't on the line, and so it wasn't – you know, it could have been a lot worse, but it's just we can't stop them for nothing.
But what did that remind you of? Did that remind you of the Georgia SEC championship game?
Yeah, I knew that. I knew
right?
To go there. Yeah,
right.
And it's just that's just a frustrating thing, because we can, you have a strong sense that we can fix this very easily, except for the guys over there, like, sucking air because he's played the whole game.
They even asked Saban about this in the press conference today, and he gave a politician answer. He answered the first part of the question. He ignored the second part of the question, which was talking about the depth. I think it came from Cecil Hurt, and we didn't see it. I mean, what was actually so amazing to me in this game, which also spoke to this whole thing we've been talking about with the depth, is whenever we had early in that game when Dalvin Tomlinson went down. Okay. And Dalvin Tomlinson is listed as a defensive end on, some depth charts where obviously, it's him and Deron Payne inside.
Sure.
When Dalvin Tomlinson went down, I said, okay, now we're going to see Josh Frazier early. We're going to see him early. Okay. We are, or somebody else to your point, because obviously you've been asking for other guys to step up as well. But we literally did not see anybody come into the game. And then next thing you know, you see Dalvin Tomlinson come back in the game pretty quickly. And that just tells you either one, they know that the depth is not there, which is why Josh Frazier couldn't stop them. Because I know you were probably saying, where's Raquan Davis? I want to see Raquan Davis. Well, I literally thought against Kentucky early in the game when Dalvin Tomlinson went down and he was down for a little bit and banged up, I said, now's your chance to show that depth early. And we did not see it. And I thought that was very telling.
Yeah, it's exactly telling. I mean, we brought in Hand, which is, he's a very good player. And at the defensive end, I'm not as worried about defensive end as I am, the interior. But, when you think about, Tomlinson, his size is, he is an interior guy. He is a tackle. And so we have him playing in. That's just our formation, and when you think about a 3-4, you got bigger, defensive linemen. But if we had to go a backup, like a true backup, if Payne couldn't play, it would be Tomlinson in the middle. And so, when he goes out, that's a material loss, right? And so Hand goes in, sort of a true defensive end. And it wasn't long that Tomlinson was back. And, I had a sigh of relief. Okay, good. He's well enough to come back in this game. So, we must be all good. And he went on and, and had a decent game and made some plays. And so all that good stuff. But look, it's just the thing that we've been tracking towards, and every week I see and not just me, you see it too. Every week there's another example of it. And so one of these weeks and look, it's like Chicken Little. I don't want to be right. It's just, you think one of these weeks, it's going to cost us. And
well, I do think what's intriguing, I do think because of the embarrassment of riches that they're able to mask it better than most teams.
Oh, okay? Without a doubt.
Right. And so because of Daron Payne is 319 pounds on the official roster. We don't know what exactly he is, but they're showing 319. Well, they're showing Dalvin Tomlinson at 307. Well, what I mean by the embarrassment of riches is Deshaun Hand, which is shocking as the former #1 player in the country. He has gotten himself all the way up to 280 pounds. And how many teams have a beast like him that runs like him at 280 pounds? And then how many guys have a beast like Jonathan Allen, who obviously is 291 pounds on the roster? So my point is they got two guys who are playing inside to give Daron Payne a little rest, who are really defensive ends, right? Who are just freaks of nature, is my point. Jonathan Allen and Deshaun Hand, no other team has them in the country. And so that's how they're able to get away with it. When you say it's going to come back to bite them, it might not. And it's only because they've got defensive ends that are 280 plus that run like deers, and other teams don't have that.
I just think, we'll talk about Arkansas. I just think that's a team that, sort of a power run team. They're going to line up and try to knock us off the ball. And there could be some fourth quarter, we need to get out on them. Because in the fourth quarter, if they're in the game,
we've got to force them into the pass,
and we've possessed the ball.
Into our strength, correct?
Yeah, that's a couple of weeks ago when you hopefully, I don't know if you're kidding or not, but you said, the rest of the schedule, book it, it's done. And the Arkansas game, that's why it concerns me. That's because you think of how they play. How is Brett Bielema going to play? You think of sort of their style, biggest, offensive line, running the ball, all of those kinds of things. And they're actually a little more sort of balanced, this year than they have been in the past. And so, maybe that'll actually play in our favor. But you think about, how would you line up if you had the horses to do it? And not everyone does, but there are teams that do. If you had the horses to do it, how would you game plan against us? And last year it wouldn't have worked because we had too many other players, Jaron and take the guys we have now.
Between Jaron and Ashawn, they were freaks of nature on their own right.
Right.
They could just take a double team. Yeah.
But add them to who we've got, right? And you say, okay, well, there's your depth, right? Well, we don't have that. And so that's where I think, last year a game plan like that wouldn't have worked. This year it maybe could. And so I don't want to talk too much about that game, but look, we're talking about him being a freak. Jonathan Allen has the opportunity. This is what I got. He has the opportunity to be one of the best defensive linemen to come through Alabama. And you could almost say he's doing it quietly in his career. He's a guy that you just got to like him. And it seems like every week he's one of the guys that has one of the interviews, and I love listening to his interview because he just gets it in a way, and he's clearly one of the team leaders. He gets it in a way that's really impressive, and he's just one of those guys. He's one of those sort of in sort of the ledger of my fandom. There's a little star next to Jonathan Allen's name, and that's just how that works, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I do agree with you that I was hoping to see some more depth created, like we just talked about with Cooper Bateman, and it was not. And from that standpoint, it's disappointing.
Yes.
I will say that I enjoyed seeing Rashaan Evans, and so it makes you wonder where their comfort level is at the inside linebacker positions, because the only person you saw in there was Rashaan Evans. Now, interestingly enough, you saw Rashaan Evans in there with Reuben Foster, and I don't have the number of plays that they ran in front of me, but Rashaan Evans got a lot of run next to Reuben Foster. there was a lot of run in this game that he got to be inside where Sean Dion Hamilton has been.
Yep.
And so it was good to see that.
Yeah, and look, Hamilton played well too, so I like the fact that we're bringing Evans along. I like the fact that we're going to have three guys, kind of in there that can do work. And it's funny, we talk about other positions where, why don't we bring along that guy? But, there's that middle linebacker. There we are bringing along that guy. So, that's an interesting kind of juxtaposition. Give me something else on defense or take me to your mini game ball.
I'm just going to take you to mini game ball because otherwise you'll steal it. And so I was very happy to see Christian Miller, and I was happy to see him early in pass rush situations. I don't know if it's because of the whole Tim Williams thing. It probably was, but it was very nice to see him in on that key fumble recovery that Alabama had. That he was when the quarterback the first fumble that the quarterback had, right. It was very nice to see him in there on the sack on that play, and I was happy to see him rewarded with some opportunity. Obviously, there's some other young guys I would have liked to have seen in there, but I was happy to see Christian Miller for the second week in a row getting to pin his ear back and play that role of rabbit rusher.
Yeah, I liked that, seeing him do that. Anthony Jennings was in early, and man, he just continues to look like a player. I do think that had a lot to do with Tim Williams, obviously missing the first half, and then, Tim Williams, makes a play on his first play of the second half, and then he just looked like a monster there in the second half. So I think it might be interesting to watch the next couple of weeks. Tim Williams is going to play with a little bit of a fire. I'm giving my mini game ball to Dalvin Tomlinson. And so we talked about him getting, nicked up and having to come out. And that happened very early in the game because after that, and I went back and looked at exactly when it was in sort of the play line. And it was still first quarter. It was about at the 5-minute mark in the first quarter. It was after Alabama had fumbled the ball. And Steven Johnson, their quarterback, had their tight end, Conrad, just wide open for what would have been a touchdown. He was in the seam, just wide.
It was a great play call.
Open.
Great play call.
It was exactly that's what that was. When you see someone do that, you know that the play caller is dialed in. That's exactly what that is. And it was beautiful and would have connected with him, except for Dalvin Tomlinson jumped up and got his mitt on the ball and batted that away. And it would have been, because he would have caught that, he would have scored a touchdown. There was no way that wouldn't have happened. And it would have been a 10-0 game. And so I don't want to suggest that, the outcome hinged on that. But that's just one of those plays that, is that can have an impact. And we're down 2 scores versus, just a field goal. And so that's the kind of play that, and rarely does the moment a play happen, I say that's my mini game ball, and I kind of laughed at myself. I said we still got 3 quarters of ball here, anything can happen. I said no, that's my mini game ball right there, and that was just a heck of a play by Tomlinson, kept it a 3-point game, and of course obviously, that wasn't the margin of the game, but that was just a hell of a play for him to make right after having had to go out.
No, absolutely. And real quick, you mentioned Jennings. I do want to quickly touch on the fact that when we would go to a 3-4-4, and we would sometimes, when they were in an obvious running situation, we would employ a 3-4-4. Jennings was the guy who was in that package. And so it felt to me in this game that Christian Miller had been pushed into a rabbit rusher role, as he likes to do specialties. And Jennings, for the first time this season, felt like he had taken that role of, I'm a starting outside linebacker when we do the 3-4-4.
Then that's an interesting thing, and this is sort of the whole sort of breaking things down that we talk about. Saban will give you a piece of the plate instead of the full plate, and so you wonder, those are 2 distinct roles that 2 different people had. Would Tim Williams had done both? Would he have done both of them? And probably so. And so I think
the answer is yes.
What's that?
Yeah, so it gave them some. I think the answer is yes, and so the good news is it gave them some run, which we might go back and pat ourselves on the back after this 3-week gauntlet and see one of those guys make a huge play.
Yes, absolutely. Talk to me about special teams.
Man, well, we talked about the whole kicking situation, so we don't need to go back over that as far as how they did things, as far as the field goal choice was concerned. I'll
say one thing, and this played out exactly the way we've said it the last 2 weeks. Adam was 2 for 3. He hit a 24 and he hit a 44, and then he missed a 35.
No, absolutely. Now, I will say he took all 7 kickoffs, which was interesting.
Yep.
He did have 4 touchbacks, which was nice. J.K. Scott got no work. I mean, he had 1 punt, and so what did he do? He kicked a 58-yarder.
Yep.
I will say for the listeners that the thing that really jumped out at me was the miff on the ball by Tony Brown.
Yes.
And so as I'm sitting here watching this, you have to feel a little bit for Tony Brown. And so obviously we don't know what happened behind the scenes. And I love the fact that Saban keeps things private because it's none of our damn business. And so when you think of what he's been through since the semifinal game last year to this is his first time in the game this season, right? On the 1 punt, that's the only punt that happened in the game.
Yep.
And that's what happened. And that just shows you God has a sense of humor.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so, yeah, he was down there, made a good play. He did, just went right through the wickets. And, you said something, that Saban keeps things private. Since we're talking about special teams, I guess Xavier Marks wish that Saban kept a few things more in-house.
Yes. I guess we can focus on that real quick for a second. He even said in his press conference today, when someone asked him about Eddie Jackson, and he talked about his vision, and they were talking about how he's able to run with the ball, but he said, we've missed some opportunities to gain field position, and we've misjudged some balls, and he clearly said, Eddie Jackson has a really good knack with that. And so is that veteran leadership? Probably so. And I think unless Eddie gets hurt, if Eddie's just a little banged up in a game, I think we still see him out there, even if it's just fair catching the ball. Because no matter what Marks did on that great return, which was awesome, I think Coach Saban would rather Eddie Jackson fair catch the ball at the right yard line than anything else.
Well, Mark's taking the ball out of the end zone. I have no idea what he was thinking. And Saban was just livid. I mean, clearly just walked out on the field and was just – I don't know how much of that they showed on TV, but, oh, man. And he would just light into him. I mean, he walked out on the field and just greeted him with a earful and walked him all the way to the sideline and then talked to him. He turned at least 2 or 3 times. He turned and walked away and came back. And at one point there was just another one of the sort of the sideline coaches, and that just it was trying to buffer and try to shield because Saban just was giving them down the road, and poor Marks, he went to the sideline, and he was kind of toxic. Not anyone wanted to be around him because what was going to happen, and I'll tell you what showed me great leadership is our Darius Stewart came over and started talking to him and building him up a little bit. Now that didn't stop Saban from coming over and getting his word in, but I thought that was neat to see our Darius do that. We talk about Eddie. Man, I don't know if you remember, he's a senior now, so this would have been 4 years ago when we were doing the show. He was getting some playing time and really looking good, and we were saying, look, this is a guy to kind of watch out for. And it's fun to be right on those, right? And I used to always call him freshman Eddie Jackson, and I want to call him open field Eddie now because when he gets the ball on a punt, he had one punt return for 17 yards, but just the way he kind of danced and skated and worked his way, through, it looked like that he was just about to sort of unlock the key to unlock the lock and take it to the house. He was just a move or two away. he just is really dynamic in that capacity. And so I want to keep him healthy. But I agree, this next gauntlet of games, Eddie will be returning the kicks.
I'll say this, okay? As dynamic as he is, but as valuable as he is as the general in the back of the defense, I think the compromise is you might see Coach Saban behind the scenes like, Eddie, if you're not 100% sure here, I want you to fair catch it, right? I'd rather have the ball in the right field position and have you healthy for these next 3 games.
Yes.
We should go back and track how many punts he returns and how many punts he fair catches in the next 3 weeks. I think that'd be a fun exercise.
No, I think that'd be fun. And I think, to your point, because your point is spot on, like we talked about last week, I wouldn't mind seeing him platoon at that position. And I wonder if it'll be Marks after that deal Saturday. Will it be, Tavon? Probably we don't put Darius back there, just now coming back, but it'll be interesting to see. I like him back there, but maybe we platoon him because I don't want to lose him at his position on defense.
No, absolutely. Very quickly on Tony Brown, even after he miffed that little punt, he stayed in on the rest of special teams, which I thought was very telling.
Yeah, I agree. That is. And Saban didn't sort of light into him in a way. And so I think a little bit, and for all sort of the negativity on Saban, he knows, I feel like he knows the temperature of his team and the circumstances and the situations. And, he kind of picks his spots. And so, I'm not going to get after Tony. He's missed a lot of time. He has gone through, some adversity. And he made a little bit of a bonehead play on a bad snap on his first game back. All right. That's different than you ran out of the end zone after you stood and looked like you were going to take a knee, and you've been doing this for 4 weeks now. That's a different circumstance. So we've sort of hinted at it, and we've covered some of our bases, Arkansas coming up. What do you see?
Man, I think, unfortunately, we're going to see a game similar to we did 2 years ago at Razorback Stadium.
Ooh,
I mean, 2 years ago. Now, when I said before that we're gonna win out here, that hasn't changed. But this is going to be one of those make you want to take a damn Tums afterwards, because 2 years ago it was a hard hitting Arkansas squad that does bring the power running game. We obviously were very fortunate to win a 14-13 ball game. I think the biggest difference in that game is, they had a running back that had 20 carries for 83 yards, to your point, that didn't get 100 yards. They had a young Alex Collins that was able to do it as well, was able to come in and spell Williams. But the difference in that team is Blake Sims was 11 of 21. Okay, granted he had 2 touchdowns, but he was 11 of 21. And so I do think that Jalen Hurts is a better passing quarterback than Blake Sims. Blake Sims had 7 carries in that ball game, ironically, from the running quarterback position. And so I think that, in that game, an O.J. Howard had 1 catch for 47 yards. Here we are 2 years ago, this young weapon had 1 catch for 47 yards, and the next guy's T.J. Yeldon. And so we match up better with this team than we did 2 years ago. I think the quarterback position is being played better by Hurts than it was 2 years ago by Sims, and we have more weapons. So is it going to be 14-13? No, but I do think that we could sit here and see a 21-13 game and equally be – it won't be a 1-point game, but a 21-13 game, and that's – we're going to get a touchdown late to make it 21-13, which is still going to make people be nervous.
Right. No, they're more balanced than we've seen them be, and hopefully that can actually play in our favor. But I think they're going to lean towards the power run. They're going to test our depth on defense. All the things that we've talked about. With these next 3 games coming up, we really need to. I'm going to give you 2 scores. We need to make a statement in this game against Arkansas, and so we need the score to be 35-7. What I think the score will be is something in the neighborhood of 24-17, and it's going to be, a little closer even than what you were thinking. But it's going to be sort of frustrating in that way, where the whole game, and look, part of this is just us being spoiled Alabama fans, where I'm not, we are not used to the game remaining a contest through the full 4 quarters. And so it becomes uncomfortable, to enter the fourth quarter with the game in jeopardy. We don't like that feeling. But I think that's what this game is going to be. And, it'll be another one of those games, thank goodness that one's over. I'm glad that one's done. And that's what this game will be. I think it's in the neighborhood of 24-17, something like that.
Well, I think either one of our scores, fans will be very frustrated by that. But I do think on the road, another tough environment to play. They always play us tough at their house. And I definitely think it will be a game that will be in doubt after quarter 3, and that will definitely piss a lot of people off.
Yeah, I'm glad that this team, and especially Jalen, because he is the quarterback, has the experience of playing at Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, that contest was up. The team was down early, and then the game was still contested late. And so, he has some of that in his tank to draw from. And I think that he has this experience against Kentucky where, he came out sort of scattershot. He regrouped himself. And so he needs to sort of merge those together and the team and the play call and all of that. And we need to say, look, we need to make a statement and we need to start strong and early in this game. And we need to take the fight to them really maybe before they're ready for it. And if we can jump up on them, then, that's what we need. But, man, like I said, I would love 35-7. That's what we need, that type of statement. I don't know that we get it. So, it'll be a fourth quarter.
I'm with you, man. But I will say the adversity that they faced against Ole Miss, I think it will be huge for these next 2 road games.
I agree. Well, I can't wait. I mean, it's going to be fun. I want the team, take your time getting ready, do everything that you need to do. But at the same time, I can't wait for Saturday to be here so we can watch it.
No, absolutely, man.
And then we'll come back and talk about it again. So, hey, this has been another edition of the Alabama Football Podcast. Thanks for listening. Roll Tide. All right.
So is there a reason that you're not bringing up any listener comments or iTunes or any of that kind of stuff?